It all started with a simple yard sale, a Saturday morning just like any other. I had been driving around my neighborhood, looking for something to do, when I saw the sign, "Yard Sale," poking out of the front yard of an old house. The kind of house you'd expect to see on a quiet street, surrounded by well-kept lawns and colorful flowers. I wasn't planning on buying anything, but there was something about the idea of poking around in someone else's old stuff that intrigued me. When I pulled into the driveway, I was greeted by an elderly woman, kind but reserved, sitting by a table covered in a hodgepodge of books, dishes, and old knickknacks. Everything seemed typical: vintage plates, worn-out furniture, glass figurines. I wasn't really expecting to find anything special, but then, tucked away in the corner of the table, I saw it. An old porcelain doll. It was small, no more than a foot tall, dressed in a faded Victorian gown. At first glance, it seemed like just another antique item, but something about the way it was positioned caught my attention. The doll was staring right at me, its glassy eyes unblinking, fixed on me as though it knew I was there. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It felt heavier than I expected, the porcelain smooth but cold. The woman noticed me holding it and came over with a soft smile. "That's my grandmother's doll," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost distant. "It's been in the family for years. She always said it had a special presence." I didn't know what to make of that. A special presence? I thought she was just being sentimental. But when she offered it to me for only a few dollars, I didn't hesitate. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but something about the doll seemed different. A little odd, maybe. But I couldn't leave it behind. I paid the woman and walked back to my car, the doll wrapped in a soft cloth. As I drove home, I thought about what she had said. A special presence. It seemed ridiculous. But why did I keep thinking about it? Why did I feel like I'd made some kind of strange connection with this little doll? I set the doll on the shelf in my living room that night, thinking nothing of it. It wasn't until later, when the house was quiet, that I began to feel uneasy. I walked past the shelf, and as I glanced at the doll, I noticed something that made me stop. The doll's eyes weren't just looking at me, they were following me. I chalked it up to lighting, or maybe my own tired mind playing tricks. But the more I looked, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that the doll was staring directly at me, no matter where I moved in the room. It was the kind of feeling you get when you're not sure if something is real, but deep down, you know it is. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt a strange sensation, the sensation of being watched. I kept imagining the doll in the corner of the room, its eyes glowing in the dark. I had to get up to check. I walked into the living room, and there it was, sitting innocently on the shelf. But even though it looked the same, I couldn't shake the thought that something was off. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling wouldn't leave me. The next day, everything seemed normal. I went about my business, trying to put the strange feeling behind me. But that night, as I was settling in, I heard a faint sound, a soft, scraping noise. It was so quiet that I almost thought it was nothing. But then it came again, closer this time. A scraping sound, like something moving. I froze. The house was still, and the sound was coming from the living room. My first thought was, it's nothing. Just the house settling. But something told me to check. I grabbed my phone, using the dim light to make my way into the living room. And there, in the faint glow of the hallway, I saw the doll again. But this time, it was different. The doll was no longer sitting still. It was turned slightly, facing the door, its eyes locked onto me. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My mind raced, trying to figure out how it had moved. I hadn't touched it. I rushed over, picking up the doll and placing it back in the original position, facing forward. But even as I set it down, I felt something. a pressure in the air, a strange weight in the room that I couldn't explain. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept checking the doll. Every time I looked at it, it felt like it was just a little bit closer to me, a little bit more real. By the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. The sense of being watched had grown unbearable. I couldn't focus on anything. The doll had become an obsession. I couldn't get rid of it, but I couldn't keep it either. I decided to put it away, locked it in a box and shoved it into the closet. I thought that would be the end of it. But that night, I woke up to a sound. This time it was louder. A soft thud, like something had fallen. I was wide awake instantly, my heart pounding in my chest. I grabbed my phone and checked the footage I had set up earlier in the night, just in case anything strange happened. And what I saw still haunts me to this day. The doll, locked away in its box, had somehow moved. The box had shifted, and the doll was sitting on the floor in front of it, facing the camera, its eyes wide open. It didn't stop there. As I watched in disbelief, I heard the faintest whisper, like someone breathing in my ear. "Take me home." I ran to the closet, opened the box, and there it was. The doll, perfectly still, as if it had never moved. But the damage was done. I couldn't escape what I had seen. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The next morning, I packed my things and left. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I never spoke about the doll again, but I know I'll never forget it. I left everything behind. The doll, the house, the strange occurrences. But I heard later that the house was sold again. The new owners found the doll in the attic, still packed in the same box. They said it was facing outward when they found it, and they didn't stay long either. So, what do you think? Can a doll really hold that kind of power? Is there something more to these objects we bring into our homes? If you've ever had a strange experience like this, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you want to hear more chilling stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to Mr. Midnight Fears. You never know what's hiding just around the corner. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever come across an object that seemed off? Something that didn't feel right, no matter how much you tried to ignore it? It wasn't supposed to be anything special. I've always been a fan of yard sales, of finding things that others overlook. But when I stumbled upon that painting, I had no idea what I was bringing into my home. This story happened in a quiet town in Oregon, a place where the most you'd expect from a yard sale was a few dusty knickknacks or mismatched furniture. But what I found that day was far from ordinary. I was browsing through this older couple's sale when I saw it, leaning against the back of their house, partially covered by a rug. At first, I thought it was just another one of those poorly done replicas. The frame was thick and old, and the colors had begun to fade. But there was something about the subject that drew me in. It was a woman, sitting in a dark room, looking down at what appeared to be a bowl of fruit. Her expression was blank, no emotion in her face, but something about her eyes. They seemed different, almost too real. I picked up the painting and asked the seller about it. The old man told me it had belonged to his grandmother, a painter who had spent her life creating pieces that were too avant-garde for the world at the time. He mentioned the painting had been in the family for generations. It sounded like a rare find, and for just $50, I couldn't say no. I didn't even question the oddness of the seller's words. I took it home that day, eager to hang it in my living room, giving the space some character. I set it on the wall opposite my favorite chair and admired it. For the first couple of days, everything seemed normal, but slowly, something started to change. I began to notice it out of the corner of my eye, the woman in the painting. At first, I thought it was just me, a trick of the light, the way shadows danced across the canvas in the evening. But the more I looked at it, the more it felt like her eyes were following me. It wasn't just that I was seeing her. The reflection seemed to shift, her gaze becoming more focused. It got to the point where I'd walk into the room, and no matter where I sat, I felt it. She was watching me. One night, as I sat in my chair, reading a book, I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman in the painting was no longer still. I turned my head to look, and that's when I saw it. Her eyes weren't just following me anymore. They had changed. The colors of the eyes were no longer the dull brown they had been. They were vibrant, alive, and directed right at me. In a rush of panic, I looked back at the rest of the room. The walls, the ceiling, the furniture, all untouched. But when I turned back to the painting, she was gone. I thought I was imagining it, that maybe the stress of the week was getting to me. But the next day, something else happened. I walked past the painting, and I swear, I saw the faintest of smiles on her face. It wasn't just a smile, though. It was knowing, like she was waiting for something. And that feeling of being watched only got stronger. I tried to move the painting, but no matter where I placed it, I couldn't escape the sense that it was still right there, just behind me, a presence that never left. That's when things escalated. Over the next few days, strange things started happening around the house. Books I hadn't touched were on the floor, moved from their shelves. Items would fall without explanation, as if something, or someone, was nudging them. Then one night, I woke to the sound of a chair scraping across the floor. I figured it was just the house settling, but as I got out of bed to investigate, I heard it again. Closer this time. The chair scraping, then a soft thud, like it had been knocked over. I walked into the living room, and there, in the middle of the floor, was the painting. It had fallen off the wall. But the odd thing? The face of the woman was now turned away from me. Her eyes were no longer visible. And in that moment, I knew. Something in that room had changed. But what was it? Why had the painting moved on its own? What did it mean that her gaze no longer sought me out? I was too scared to move it again. I thought about getting rid of it. But something told me that the painting wasn't done with me yet. What was I dealing with? Was this just my mind playing tricks on me? Or was the painting alive in some strange way? I didn't plan to stop at the yard sale that morning. I was coming back from the grocery store, and I remember the sky being this dull, grayish color. The kind that almost convinces you rain is coming, but it never does. There was nothing special about the sale. A few tables, clothes racks, some children's toys. But the moment I stepped out of my car, something, I still can't explain it, pulled my attention to an object leaning against a tree at the far end of the driveway. A small wooden frame chalkboard, about the size you'd expect in a preschool classroom. It looked old. Not antique old, just used. The frame had dents. The surface had deep chalk scratches that had been erased 100 times but never fully disappeared. And the price tag? Just $2. I picked it up, and as soon as I touched it, I felt the surface was colder than everything else around it. Not icy, just wrong. You know when you pick up something metal that's been in the shade for hours? It felt like that. But I shrugged it off. I used to teach part-time years ago. I've always had this weird attachment to old teaching supplies. So I bought it. Simple as that. Or so I thought. I cleaned the chalkboard, wiped away the dust, and set it in my guest room. Nothing strange. Nothing eerie. That night, I went to bed early. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up to a sound I'll never forget. A slow, steady scrape, like chalk dragging across a surface. Not quick writing, not scribbling, just a deliberate, careful movement, like someone trying to write quietly. I laid there perfectly still, listening. And you know how your body knows the difference between sounds made inside your house versus sounds from outside? This sound was inside, specifically, down the hallway. I told myself the house was settling. Pipes, wind, anything. But the rhythm didn't stop. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. I stayed awake until dawn. And when the light finally came in through my curtains, the sound stopped. I walked down the hallway slowly. Not because I was scared, but because part of me didn't want to confirm what I already suspected. When I entered the guest room, I froze. There, written in faint white chalk across the top of the board, was a single word. Home. Not big. Not dramatic. Just there. I remember staring at it for a long time, trying to convince myself I had missed it when I cleaned it. Maybe it was residue from the previous owner. Maybe the lighting hit it. I erased it, went about my day, forced myself to forget. But that night, again, at 2:17 a.m., I woke up to the same scraping sound. This time, I didn't wait for sunrise. I went straight to the guest room. Another word was written, a bit larger. Home. Again. I erased it silently. But what happened the third day? That's when the tone changed. On the third morning, I didn't hear anything during the night. No scraping, no rhythm. I thought it was over. But when I walked into the guest room, I felt cold air hit my face, as if someone had opened a window. Except no windows were open, and the chalkboard had a new word. Stay. That one word felt different. Home could be explained away as leftover chalk, but stay. Someone wrote that. And more importantly, it wasn't the word I erased the night before. Someone had changed it. I erased the board again and immediately went to my computer to message the family who sold it. I needed to know the history. A teenage girl answered the chat request. When I asked about the chalkboard, her immediate reply wasn't casual or confused. It was, "Did something happen?" She typed it fast, like she was waiting for someone to ask. I didn't know how to respond. I just said, "Why do you ask?" She told me the chalkboard used to belong to her younger brother. Then she paused. Took almost 3 minutes to type the next message. My mom didn't want it in the house anymore. I pressed for details. She hesitated again. Finally, she said, "My brother wrote things at night, even after he stopped using the board. It was like he continued." I asked what she meant. Her exact words were, "We'd wake up and something would be written, even when he was asleep." I asked where her brother was now. She didn't answer. She just stopped responding entirely, and I stared at the screen, realizing, whatever she wasn't telling me, it was probably the part I needed to know the most. I decided I needed proof. I turned on every light in the house, pulled up a chair, and sat in the hallway facing the guest room, keeping the chalkboard in full view. I didn't blink much, didn't look at my phone, just stared. At 2:17 a.m. it happened. Not the scraping. Something louder. A crack, like wood twisting under sudden weight. The chalkboard, which had been leaning against the wall, shifted forward, fell flat on its face, and slid several centimeters toward the door. When I stood up, my chest felt hollow. Like my heartbeat didn't know how fast it should go. I slowly approached the board, lifted it, and saw a new word written underneath it. Found. Not on the board, on the carpet. Someone had written it on the floor beneath the board. This wasn't leftover chalk. This wasn't imagination. Something was responding. And it wasn't afraid of being seen. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in the living room with the TV on low volume until sunrise. When I finally worked up the courage to check the rest of the house, I found something that made my legs go weak. My back door was wide open. Wide. Not cracked. Not unlocked. Wide open. There were no footprints. No signs of forced entry. Nothing missing. Just an open door, and that one word burned into my mind. Found. I called the police. I didn't mention the chalkboard writing. I already knew how that would sound. But I told them about the door. The officer took a report, walked through the house, asked the basic questions. But when he stepped into the guest room, he noticed the chalkboard. He tilted his head, looked at me, and said, "Where'd you get this?" I told him it was from a yard sale. He nodded like he'd heard that sentence too many times. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You'd be surprised how many calls start with those two words." He didn't clarify, and I didn't ask. I removed it from my house the same day. I didn't sell it, didn't donate it. I took it to a recycling facility, placed it in the disposal container myself, and watched it fall into the pile. For the next week, I slept with the hallway light on. Every night, at 2:17 a.m., I would wake up automatically, as if my body had memorized the time. There was no sound, no writing, no movement. Just that internal clock reminding me. I still don't know what wrote those words. I don't know what the girl was afraid to tell me. I don't know why the door opened on its own. But I do know this. Some things from yard sales aren't meant to be reused, repurposed, or restored. Some things belong exactly where they were before someone tried to give them away. I never meant for a yard sale find to change the course of my life, but that's exactly what happened. It began on a Sunday morning, like any other, when I drove through a quiet suburban neighborhood looking for a bargain. There was a simple white sign stuck in the grass, "Yard Sale." I slowed down, curiosity pulling me in. What I didn't know was that by the time I left, I'd be wondering if some things are best left untouched. I wandered among tables stacked with trinkets, old furniture, books that smelled like decades of neglect. Then I saw it. An antique mirror leaning against a wooden chest. The frame was beautifully carved, wood aged and darkened by time. But what caught my attention was how it caught the light. One side of the glass reflected the yard and sky perfectly. The other side seemed off. I can't explain how, but the reflection felt deeper, like there was more behind it. The woman running the sale smiled kindly, told me the mirror had been passed down in her family, moved house to house for generations, and that she needed to part with it. It was cheap. Too cheap. I felt a surge of excitement. Here was something rare, something with history. I committed and brought the mirror home. Setting it up in my bedroom, I placed it opposite the window. At first, everything seemed fine. I liked the way it opened the room up, added light and style. But then I started noticing something subtle. When I glanced into the mirror from a certain angle, I thought I saw movement behind me, a silhouette. But every time I turned around, nothing. No one there. Night came. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the mirror in my peripheral vision. I thought maybe the branches outside were casting shapes, maybe my mind playing tricks. But then I heard the softest thing, a tap, 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 like someone knocking on the glass. My heart jumped. I sat up. The mirror's surface seemed to ripple, just for an instant. I blinked, and it was gone. Sleep came reluctantly. The next morning I felt tired, uneasy. I avoided looking directly into that mirror. But the sense of being watched wouldn't leave. As days passed, I found items in the room slightly shifted. A book that was on the shelf now lying on the floor. The mirror's angle different. I asked myself, am I losing it? But I wasn't the only one who noticed. My partner asked why I was glancing back so often. I didn't answer. Then came the night that changed everything. I woke up around 2 a.m. to darkness heavier than usual. Something drew my attention to the mirror. Its glass edge glowed faintly, just the corner. And in that glow, I saw a figure standing behind me, taller than me, unmoving. I froze. I didn't dare turn. My breath caught. Time stretched. Then the figure raised its hand and pointed at the mirror. Not at me. At the mirror. I felt a dull rush of fear. The hand touched the glass, and the reflection changed. It wasn't me in the mirror anymore. It was someone else. Someone older, worn, eyes empty. It smiled. A long, slow smile. My heart thundered. I jumped out of bed and turned, but again, nothing. The room was empty. The mirror just sat there, glass intact, frame still carved wood. The reflection had returned to normal. But I knew what I had seen. I knew something had broken in that room. Now I'm left with questions I can't answer. Why did that mirror reflect someone else? Whose presence visited me? And what did the seller know, or not know? Before I tell you what happened next, the consequences, the dark history I dug up, the truth behind the mirror, tell me, have you ever brought home something you found too good to pass up? Something that ended up making you wonder why you grabbed it in the first place? Drop a comment and let me know. We'll come back to that.